Estructura 3.4, present tense of the verbs tener and venir. So these two verbs are among the most frequently used in Spanish. Because most of their forms are irregular, you're going to have to learn each one individually. So even though we just have two verbs here, there's actually kind of a lot of information for this estructura point. So let's get to it. So here are the conjugations. So this is what you need to memorize. You just need to learn them just like this. Tener means to have. Venir means to come. So what's going to happen is you're going to still drop off the ER ending of tener before you add your endings. But with many of them, we're going to change the stem, which is the beginning part of the verb as well. So we don't quite hear yet. So tengo, notice that it's not, if it were regular, it would just be teno, T-E-N-O, but that's part of what makes this an irregular verb. So the yo form of tener, so to say I have, it's yo tengo. This should sound familiar from Lección Uno when we were talking about how old we are. In Spanish, you express how many years you have, whereas in English, we say how many years we are old, but it works just slightly different in Spanish. Tú, the tú form is tienes. So notice that the endings now go back to the way a regular ER verb works, but the stem now has a stem change. We changed it from ten to the word or to the stem tien. We added in an I in there. So tien, and then the ending is es. Tienes. Usted, él, ella, tiene. Nosotros tenemos. Vosotros tenéis. Ustedes, ellos, and ellas tienen. Okay? Venir, IR verb. And so really these work much like the ER and IR verbs that we learned earlier in this lesson as far as how the endings go, besides that yo form. So we learn these two together because they're almost identical. Tener, the yo form is tengo. Venir, the yo form is vengo. Tú vienes, él, ella, usted viene. Nosotros venimos. Vosotros venís. And ustedes, ellos, ellas vienen. So these are very comparable to what we learned in the previous estructura with ER and IR verbs. All right, let's move on. The endings, we've been through this. They're the same as those of regular ER and IR verbs, except for the yo forms, which are irregular, tengo and vengo. In the tú, usted, and ustedes forms, the E of the stem changes to IE as shown below. So tener, there's the stem, ten, and then the verb forms, tienes, tiene, and tienen. Venir changes to ven, and then vienes, viene, vienen. ¿Tienes una familia grande, Marisa? Do you have a big family, Marisa? No, tengo una familia pequeña. No, I have a small family. Only the nosotros and vosotros forms are regular. Compare them to the forms of comer and escribir that you learned on page 96. So tener, tenemos, tenés. Comer, comemos, comes. Venir, venimos, venís. Escribir, escribimos, escribís. In certain idiomatic or set expressions in Spanish, you use the construction tener plus a noun to express to be and then an adjective. This chart contains a list of the most common expressions with tener. So you need to memorize all of these and practice them because they definitely will be a part of this lesson's assessment. So tener años, we had learned that in lesson 1. Tener calor is to be hot. If you want to say very hot, tener mucho calor. So this is talking about a person's feeling of body temperature. Tener cuidado is to be careful. To be very careful is tener mucho cuidado. Now, we're technically not saying careful here. We're technically saying care. Tener cuidado is to have care. And so mucho means much or a lot of. Tener mucho cuidado is to have a lot of carefulness or have a lot of care. Tener frío is the opposite of tener calor, so to be cold. Tener hambre, to be hungry. Notice that before we were using mucho to say very, and with hambre we say mucha. Again, we're not literally saying to be hungry. What we're literally expressing is to have hunger. Hunger is a noun, and mucha is an adjective, and so mucho is an adjective, but we need to make sure it agrees. Hambre is actually a feminine word. The word for hunger is la hambre. And so we need to have our adjective feminine as well, which is why it's mucha instead of mucho. Tener miedo de is to be afraid of. Tener prisa is to be in a hurry. Again, prisa is a feminine word, and so we'll use mucha to express being in a very big hurry. Tener razón is to be right. No tener razón is to be wrong. There isn't actually an expression for wrong. There is, but not for these tener expressions. Tener sed is to be thirsty or tener mucha sed. Tener sueño, to be sleepy. And then tener suerte is to be lucky. So looking down at the example below, ¿tienen hambre ustedes? Are y'all hungry? Sí, y tenemos sed también. Yes, and we are thirsty too. Another tener expression, which is not on the previous list, is to express an obligation. And to do that, it's going to be tener que. And that's how you express that you have to do something. Like, ¿qué tienes que estudiar hoy? What do you have to study today? Tengo que estudiar biología. I have to study biology. Okay, so to express having to do something like an obligation, it's tener plus the word que. And sort of related, but on the other end of the spectrum, to ask people if they feel like doing something, it's tener ganas de, okay? So we've got all these tener expressions, which you must memorize. We've got tener que, which means to have to do something. And then we've got tener ganas de, which means to feel like doing something. And so you'll use tener ganas de, of course, conjugating tener, and then an infinitive after that, and that will express to feel like doing something. Like this. ¿Tienes ganas de comer? Do you feel like eating? And this is kind of hard to look at and literally translate because it doesn't really work that way. That's why it's kind of its own expression that you just have to memorize and understand what it's talking about. So, do you feel like eating? Tienes ganas de, and then the infinitive is comer. No, tengo ganas de dormir. No, I feel like sleeping. And that is the end of Estructura 3.4.